we wake, hear the birds and see the sun. Side by side our fears are done. Oh, the good times just begun. Oh, we know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright.
Today I'm going to tell you the story of how we found our $8,000 land and sea craft and what it took to get it on the water. I had been looking for a land and sea craft, and I remember driving by one on a lonely stretch of highway between Quartzsite and Wickenburg in the middle of the Arizona desert on the side of the road. These are the pictures I took from the side of the road the first time I saw her. Although she had been off the water for several years, she was a fully equipped and largely unmolested example, and so we called and made a deal on her right away. I brought a battery with me when I went to pick her up, and then powered the outdrive that was down right up, no problem, and then hooked her up to the truck and took her home. First step was just to make sure that the engines on the boat were going to run. Okay, here we are, getting ready to try one of the motors for the first time. Beth is over here.
Hi!
At the steering wheel, ready to try to crank it up. I'm going to watch the motor when she does that. No idea what's going to happen, but we put a little can of fuel, so we have fresh fuel, checked all the fluids. Everything's intact and connected, and the outdrive is sitting in water so it can circulate. So turn on the ignition for a sec, give it a second, and just crank it for a little bit and hear what happens. Okay, hold off for a sec. Let me see if there's fuel in the fuel line.
Sounds like it wants to start.
Yeah.
Tell me when.
Okay, I'm going to put a little starting fluid, then we're going to try it again. Okay, go.
Oh, it started.
Yeah, that's starting fluid. Try again. Okay, give it just a tiny bit of that throttle.
When I do it?
No, just right now. Go ahead. Just a little bit. Okay, try again.
More or no?
One more. Okay, put the throttle back down.
Now Jacob's trying to start it. It wants to run. It does. It's trying so hard.
All right, well. Water coming out though, right down there? Water coming out of there. Okay. Oil pressure is at like 75. These Volvo AQ170s have 3 Solex one-barrel carburetors. After we confirmed that the engines would run, we made a list of all the things that we needed to do to have reliable, functioning engines. You can see here, for instance, the fuel lines between the carburetors are ancient and getting very brittle. But also, we wanted to replace the fuel pumps and in the cooling system for sure, thermostats, and rebuilding the water pumps. And the most important advice I could give anyone who's going to start a boat motor that's been out of the water for any time at all is before you even crank the motor to check out the impeller on the water pumps. The impellers on both of these motors were just completely destroyed, and then that resulted in a bunch of crap pieces of impeller being stuck all through the cooling system, so it was quite a nightmare. On these motors, I actually found that it's easier just to take the entire water pump off of the motor and out, and then you can see here, ended up just rebuilding the entire water pump, all new seals, and of course, new impellers. And on the water pump, make sure when you're taking the water pump apart to keep close track of what order all the seals go in, because it's not obvious once you disassemble the water pump. And on the impeller cover, make sure you mark which way it faces if you're working with this motor, because it isn't obvious and the screw pattern is not perfect. The cover only goes on one way, but once you take it off, it's not obvious which way it goes on again. So make sure you put a mark on that. That'll let you line it up the same way it came off. Just up from the water pump on the front of the motor, actually on the top front of the motor, you'll find the thermostat housing. And you'll see it has one pipe going down on one side and two pipes going down on the other side. This is all part of the housing. And so when you order a new thermostat, you'll also want to get the rings, the rubber seals for these pipes that come down on both sides of the motor. This is essential and actually a little bit difficult to get those in there and sealed. So for sure, keep that in mind. You want those seals for those pipes on both sides when you put a new thermostat on one of these motors. We found out the hard way that if you have any kind of clog in your cooling system on these motors, that you can get oil and water mixing. And we found this out the hard way. Like I said, it was a complete disaster, and we kept having this problem. So I'm going to show you the number one culprit for clogging up your cooling system on these motors. And it's a part I didn't even know existed when I got this boat, but this boat has oil coolers on it. And I'll show you where here on the side of the motor with an arrow. The oil filter actually screws on to the cooler, and so you have to remove the oil filter to remove this oil cooler. And inside that, there is a manifold of sorts, a grid system, where the water flows through and the oil flows around it. I ended up finding a thick piece of wire that I could use to clean out all the little tubes, and eventually got the things all cleaned up, and the seals were luckily salvageable in this case, and so we were able to rebuild the oil coolers. I ordered rebuild kits for all 6 carburetors, and then talked my marine mechanic into rebuilding them for me. So I didn't have to rebuild the carburetors. I probably could have, but he had a lot more experience with it, and I was glad to have him rebuild the carburetors. I took the fuel lines down. The fuel lines were kind of a manifold, the way they were set up between the 3 carburetors. So I took them down to a hose repair shop in Phoenix and had them rebuild the fuel lines. The fuel pumps on these motors had been abandoned and replaced with electric fuel pumps. But thanks to the age of the internet, you can actually find all the original stock parts now, and we were able to order original factory fuel pumps, which work great. Even after we solved the oil-water mixing on one of the motors, we still had a problem with overheating. And so we decided out of a precaution to take the cylinder head off and have it rebuilt, make sure we didn't have a blown cylinder head gasket or something like that. It's fairly easy to take off on these motors. 8 main bolts on the top. We sent the cylinder head out for refurbishment, and that meant new valve springs and guides, and it gave us a chance to take a look at the condition of the cylinders and the cylinder head gasket. Everything was like brand new when we put her back together, and we have spare parts to do the other motor soon. So we made multiple trips to Lake Pleasant just trying to work out all the bugs. And also I took the trailer in and had the brakes converted to electric and the axle bearings repacked. And so step by step we got everything pretty solid. That first year we got her, we did take her to Lake Powell, and we even towed little Percy with the Tesla. But even then, we were still having overheating problems with one of the motors. So I wasn't vlogging then, but we still had a lot of mechanical challenges the first trip to Lake Powell. Even so, it was an epic trip, and we were back literally the next month after doing some more repairs. We weren't vlogging then, but I might be able to do a video just about Lake Powell where I narrate like I am now. In the end, the overheating problem all came down to this damn thermostat housing and the thermostat that I had ordered. It turns out that the thermostat I had received was not the correct one, and it was unable to open within the housing. So even though we could take it out and test it, once you installed it, it couldn't open. So we were running the entire time with the thermostat closed, and the engine actually stayed with an operating temperature despite that, just to show you how amazing the cooling system is on those motors. In the end, we were into it about $12,000 to get this boat on the water, and made some epic Lake Powell memories right out of the gate. This is a clip of the very first time I ever got her up on plane.